What if Delta Airlines was like, actually, your flight has been rerouted into hell?
Oh my God.
Which I guess would just be, I don't know, Dulles International Airport. What's good? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I am a grown man who never read the Percy Jackson books as a kid, but I'm reading them now as an adult, and I've now finished 2 of them. Look at me go. I'm on a quest to determine if this book series has been slept on by society, and I'm not on this quest alone. I am joined by a very special person that comes on this quest and really helps me navigate the waters of what is going on with Greek mythology, because I never took a Greek mythology class in high school or college, so it's very helpful for me to have her. It is our resident Greek myth correspondent who still knows stuff about Percy Jackson, so she won't spoil anything accidentally. It's Dr. Moiya McTier. Dr. Moiya, how is it going?
Oh, Mike, thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for that introduction. I want that whole title on a business card.
Oh, yeah. Just that whole big lead-in. Just, Dr. Moiya, you may know me from...
Yes, that's what I want. But no, it feels great to be here. I loved these books growing up. I am not a new Olympian. I'm an OG Olympian, and I'm excited to talk about the second book. I'm curious to see what you think of the second book compared to the first.
I really like it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the book. I think the story was really well told. I do know that there are lots of similarities and homages paid to the story of Odysseus, which I think is very fun. I liked how different it was from the first book, so I don't know if I can really compare if I liked it more or less than the first one. I think what I enjoyed is that it felt like I was reading a completely different book, yet it was still fully in the Percy Jackson world. So it didn't just feel like, oh, here we go again, just because this one takes place over only 10 days instead of multiple months. And we've got new characters and it's completely different. They're barely at the camp. It feels very different from the first one, but still the same universe where I didn't feel like I was consuming something completely different. I really enjoyed it. And I love Tyson so much. So much. And I can't wait to meet our new friend Thalia.
Yes. Oh, Thalia's a badass. So yeah, it's a good time.
She's very cool. I'm very excited. And I want to get this on the record now because of mythology stuff. But it was funny because obviously I've played Hades the video game quite a bit, and I'm quite a big fan of it. And something we learned from the character at the end of book 2, we are revealed it is Thalia. She has Aegis the shield, and Aegis is Zeus's thing, right? So of course it would make sense that that was Thalia because she's the daughter of Zeus.
I thought the Aegis was Athena's thing.
The Aegis shield is a shield carried primarily by Zeus in Greek mythology, which he sometimes lent to Athena. So there we go.
Okay, yeah, because she was his favorite child.
But I felt very silly because the Aegis shield is my favorite weapon by far in Hades the video game, and I just didn't put 2 and 2 together. I had already predicted that Thalia was going to be the person, but I had evidence staring me straight in the face, so much so that to make sure I made note of it, I wrote in my notes where I do all the notes for the episodes, I wrote Aegis from Zeus, so duh, Thalia.
Good. That's a great note. Yeah, I'm so glad that she appears. I'm really excited for the third book because there are more characters to come and more exciting things, obviously. But yeah.
Great. I'm excited. Now, let's talk about the various myths. We have a list of topic questions. The topics come from 2 different sources. The first source is me in episodes when I go, I got to ask Dr. Moiya about this. The second source is the folks who are the members of our Olympic court, the Ultra God tier on the Patreon. They have submitted the things they want to learn the most about. So right off of the bat, I think this works a whole heck of a lot for book 2. What are the origins of the Golden Fleece?
Oh, yeah. You can't talk about book 2, Sea of Monsters, and not talk about the Golden Fleece. It's the whole point of the book, that and saving Grover.
Right.
So the Golden Fleece is a really cool story from Greek mythology. You see it in the Odyssey, you see it in the story of Jason and the Argonauts, but the fleece itself is the skin of a golden magical ram that was the offspring of a questionably consensual coupling between Poseidon and a nymph named Theophany. I'm going to put it that way because that's less gruesome than the other ways I could have put that.
There we go.
So this makes the ram Percy's half-brother, and you'll see that in a lot of the characters that we come across in this book.
Wow. You're right.
Poseidon has so many children, and so many of them try to kill Percy, or Percy tries to kill them. It's interesting. But back to the ram. The ram was golden and had these magical abilities to fly and speak. The ram itself was sent to rescue Phrixus, who was a Boeotian prince who was about to be sacrificed by his father. So his stepmom tricked or convinced his father to sacrifice him, and the dead mother was like, no, I'm not going to let that happen. So she sent this ram to save Phrixus and his sister, but the sister fell off while the ram was flying away.
Oh no.
Very sad.
Poor Phryxa.
Phrixus and Helle was the sister, and where she fell off and landed in the ocean is called Hellespont, that area where she fell.
Oh, okay.
So the ram saves Phrixus, flies him to the island of Colchis, and then Phrixus repays this kindness by sacrificing the ram to Zeus, and then hanging the ram's fleece in a grove that Jason was then sent to retrieve. So I feel really bad for this ram.
Yeah. You had a job, you did the job, but unfortunately, you met your demise, man. Oh.
Imagine if you had a job, and if you did the job really well, you got fired at the end of it. The incentive system is all off.
Yeah, that's not what you want. I guess my job kind of is that, because with Potterless, it was, I'm a man who hasn't read the Harry Potter books, and then I read them, and I was like, oh no.
The premise of the show is gone. Eventually, you'll get there with the newest Olympian.
Right, but thankfully, there's so many books, and then there's spin-off books and stuff. I think I'm going to be good.
And the show,
which will hopefully have 1 million seasons. I think I'm going to be all set. Me and Uncle Rick are going to become best friends. So we'll have episodes where we just chat and stuff. I think it'll be fine. It'll be okay. And then obviously, I'm definitely stretching the podcast intentionally, as one-star reviews love to tell me.
1 chapter per episode. It makes sense.
Look, and I've done the math. I'm doing more than 1 chapter per episode, and I'm actually going at a faster rate than I did for book 7 of Harry Potter. So everyone, just chill out and enjoy the free podcast.
Yes.
Anyway, this is a nice little segue, because in this answer, you mentioned Colchis. So what's up with the Colchis Bulls? They were really cool, but also scary.
Really cool. Yes. So the Colchis Bulls are magical bulls who live on the island of Colchis, which is ruled by King Aetes. You'll see a lot of family ties as we go through this episode, but Aetes is the son of Helios, the titan of the sun, and the brother of Circe, the witch, who comes up a lot in mythology. So these bulls were created by Hephaestus, the smith god, and they are huge, they're made of bronze, and they can breathe fire. So they make very good attack animals, and that's why you see them attacking Camp Half-Blood at the end of this book. Colchis is the same island where the Golden Fleece was kept. So when Jason went on his quest to retrieve the Golden Fleece, one of his tasks that King Aetes said he had to do was yoke all of these bulls. So that wooden thing that connects 2 bulls together by their necks, that's called a yoke. And Jason was supposed to do that, but they breathe fire and they're really hot. So I think this is one of your other questions. Medea, who was Aetes' daughter, gave Jason a very special lotion that would protect him from the heat of these bulls.
Okay.
And that's where the sunscreen comes from, the SPF 50,000 or whatever.
Yeah, the last question that I had on the list of topics for you was, what's Medea's deal? Specifically, Medea's SPF 50,000 sunscreen. So,
so she gave it to Jason.
We have checked that off. That's fantastic. Also, I'm glad that you clarified what yoking meant, because when you said yoke the bull, my only thing that I've ever yoked was either weights or an egg. I didn't imagine that you could crack open a bull and then separate out the yolk so that you can later use it when you're making a whiskey sour,
right,
which is So beautiful and wonderful. And I'm so thankful to my friend Tim for showing me how to do that, because we love a frothy alcoholic beverage. It's so nice and wonderful. Everything should come in a sour.
Yes. Thank you, Tim. And yeah, I think that would have been an interesting, impossible task if he had to yoke all the bulls in that way. But it is spelled differently. It's Y-O-L-K is the egg, and Y-O-K-E is what you do with bulls or oxen or other things that you yoke.
Okay. Look at all of the things we're learning. Greek mythological expert and also farming expert, Dr. Moiya McTier.
I did grow up in the woods.
You did. You grew right. Astonishing.
It's amazing how often growing up in the woods and studying mythology give you overlaps in knowledge basis.
Right. And did growing up in the woods, did that inspire you to study and write a book about and get your PhD in space?
No, it was free pizza that got me interested in space, but it didn't hurt. I saw the stars.
Free pizza always lures you in. Okay. So now let's get back to another question that a lot of people asked about. We learn about Tantalus, the very scary, but still in the Percy Jackson book series, comedic relief type villain. We learned his story a little bit in the book, but is that accurate? I know sometimes the Percy Jackson books can kind of water things down. My general understanding from what I'm remembering in Sea of Monsters is that he served his children as food to the gods that came over?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually love this because it's not very watered down compared to other myth references that get into the Percy Jackson books. And so Tantalus's punishment is basically what he says. He was the son of Zeus, so he was granted all kinds of favors, including getting invited up to Olympus. And then he squanders that invitation by stealing some of the gods' ambrosia and nectar and bringing it back to the mortal world, which is just something you don't do.
No.
Don't steal from the gods.
Right. I feel like you would at least just ask, say, hello, is it cool if I take some of this home?
Can I have a doggy bag, please?
I think Tantalus in the book might have said something along the lines of, I just took a doggy bag of it home. I feel like that does sound familiar.
Right, but that wasn't his only crime. Like you said, after he stole the ambrosia and nectar, he then invited some of the Olympians to eat at his home, or like they ended up eating at his home, and he fed them his son Pelops in a stew.
Yeah. So here's my question. Why?
Why? That's a great question.
It wasn't like to get back at the gods because they were angry at him for taking the ambrosia. My, at least understanding from the book, was he took the nectar and the ambrosia and the gods were like, yo, not cool. We don't like you anymore. And then he said, I'll show you. Here's kid stew. Yeah. Is that not the case?
I think that accounts differ, and that's a detail of the myth that might be kind of vague. And so you can interpret it in a lot of different ways. But I got the impression that he was just trying to trick the gods, and he like had other kids and didn't need to save them. So he decided to feed them one of his kids.
I feel like there's other culinary tricks you could do.
Yeah, like just give them tea, but offer them salt instead of sugar, you know?
Right. There's so many other things you could do. Change an ingredient. Be like, I used pinto beans instead of kidney beans. Whoa.
That'll get him. But no, I do think that his punishment was actually tame compared to what he did. Like, if you steal from the gods and then feed them your child secretly, I feel like you shouldn't just not get to eat or drink for the rest of eternity, right? So his punishment is that he's stuck in the underworld in a pond that goes up to his, what's this called? A chin. I'm touching it on my face. Like, what is this called? So the water goes up to his chin, and there is a branch with fruit hanging over his head. And anytime he tries to lean down to get a drink of water or reach up to get some of the fruit, it gets out of his reach. And you see that a lot in the book too. One thing they don't mention is that there's also supposed to be this really large rock hanging over Tantalus's head that could fall at any moment. And all of this temptation, the food and water just out of reach, the rock that could fall at any moment, that's where we get the word tantalizing from.
Oh, cool.
Lots of linguistics in this episode.
Yeah, that is very cool. And I do feel like the punishment is harder if the food and the drink is right there, because I am the type of person where if I am playing video games or watching a movie or watching a sporting event on TV, and there's some sort of food in front of me, the amount of food I will eat is however much is there. And I learned this the hard way once. I was playing FIFA, the video game, with my buddies in college. And I did eat an entire Target plastic thing of peanut butter filled pretzels, which I do believe is at least 18 servings. They ate some, but I definitely had the most. And that is how I converted to becoming a big baby carrot boy. Because worst case, if you eat an entire bag of baby carrots, wow, I have x-ray vision now. I do know that's a lie. But,
Right.
you know, look at all this beta carotene. I'm healthy now.
I love that. When you ate those pretzels, you were like a significant fraction peanut butter pretzel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like 2% of your body was pretzel.
You know, you are a cheat. Moving on. Something that comes up in this book, it's a classic thing that I've seen in a couple different forms of media, from podcasts to movies to all this stuff. But I would love to hear your take on the sirens. They're very interesting. I feel like they're very well known. I feel like they are portrayed differently in lots of different things. So what's the deal with the sirens?
Sirens are super cool. Some scholars think that sirens gave us the modern day mermaid folklore that we have. And you do see them in some of the most popular Greek mythology stories like the Odyssey. So sirens were half women, half bird. Sometimes they're like a bird with a woman's head. Sometimes they're a woman with wings and talons. It varies from story to story. But they're supposed to be the offspring of a river god named Achelous and one of the 9 muses. Different writers say different things about their origin, but Ovid and a lot of other writers said that the sirens actually used to be human, like not half bird, half human, but just human, and that they served Persephone, who, if you don't know, Persephone is the daughter of Demeter, who was stolen away by Hades to become the queen of the underworld.
Oh, I know this because I've played Hades the video game.
Yeah,
and
I
I've
was
also
like-
seen Hades Town.
There you go. Yeah, I was like, if there's one thing about Greek mythology that Mike knows, it's Persephone.
Persephone is very cool. I'm a big fan. Big Persephone guy over here.
In some stories, after Persephone was kidnapped, Demeter changed the sirens into these gruesome forms as punishment for letting Persephone be taken. And in others, Demeter gave them their wings so that they would be less gruesome as a way to get them to look for Persephone with Demeter.
Interesting. Such different interpretations.
Yeah, but I love that they have this power to lure all of these sailors to their deaths. So many people were said to have died because they crashed onto the rocks around the Siren Island. And I love stories where you find loopholes and where you find ways around the rules. And the way that Odysseus and Annabeth and other characters in these stories deal with the sirens by just like tying themselves to the mast of the ship and making everyone else plug up their ears with wax or something. I love that loophole. I'm a big fan of the siren stories, but they aren't in a lot of other myths that you see just by themselves.
Okay, so it's usually just something Odyssey related and anything else? No.
Yeah, or like hero related, where they're usually seen as one obstacle that the hero has to overcome by getting past their island. And it was said that if someone did get past their island without dying, without succumbing to the siren song, that the sirens would die.
Oh.
So at the end of some myths, after Odysseus sails away, the sirens like fall into the water and die.
Okay. And then did Odysseus do what Annabeth tried to do / did successfully do, which is, I want to hear the song to become wiser, but I don't want to fall under the temptation? Is that something he did?
Yeah, ultimately, he had all of his crew stuff up their ears so that they couldn't hear. And then he had them tie him to a part of the ship without letting him go so that he could hear it and not jump into the water.
Okay, nice. I am glad that actual earplugs have been developed because I can't imagine intentionally putting more wax into your ear. I'm a very earwaxy boy. I've had my ears like clogged up from too much before.
No. Do you do the thing where you burn the tunnel?
So I've never done that.
Okay.
And I guess just like, if you don't want to hear about my ears and stuff, everybody, skip ahead. I do the hydrogen peroxide thing where you put like 5 drops of hydrogen peroxide in and then let it burble up and then you flip your head and let it kind of drain out. So that has worked. I have had my ears close up one time where it was like really bad. It was when Kelly and I were on our honeymoon.
Oh, no.
And I guess just like being in the water a lot because we were in the Dominican Republic, water, salt water, whatever, they kind of closed up to where I just couldn't hear very well. And it was very scary.
Oh, no.
And we were trying to see what kind of remedies there are because obviously Q-tips are not what you're supposed to do. So we're trying to figure out what we can do. And the internet told us hydrogen peroxide. The resort did not have hydrogen peroxide. But the internet also said olive oil could work. So we asked the Italian restaurant at the resort if they could give us some olive oil. And they did. And we tried the thing. And it did not work. But my ears were very smooth and smelled good. And then went home, hydrogen peroxided it. And then it worked eventually. It took a couple of days, but eventually it did. Wow. And then I went to an ENT to get them like straight up cleared out. And... So Kelly's younger brother is in med school now, and he was doing an internship with an ENT, an ear, nose, throat doctor. I went to that doctor. They did the ear thing, and at one point they were cleaning out my ears, and then they switched out the container where they were, putting the excess stuff and then got a new one. And I told this to Kelly's brother, David, and he had worked there for multiple months. And he goes, "Oh, you must have had a lot of wax. We've never had to change the thing before." It's been a problem like my whole life. I don't know what about me produces a lot of earwax. Maybe it's I got a big old brain and it's, shoving stuff out my ears. But
yeah, that's how it works.
I have to be very on top of it now. So yeah, this is a long way to say I cannot imagine intentionally adding wax to an ear. It just goes against my entire being.
Yeah. The physics nerd in me wants to know what the song sounds like what frequencies are they using? Because earplugs aren't that effective, especially at blocking the very high and very low frequencies. So I feel like just a bunch of wax that they would have had in ancient Greece time would not have done the job.
Right. What they need is, because certainly wax is not particular, whatever the ear department, health, FDA equivalent for ear protection. When I worked at the air separation unit that I worked at in Seattle before I became a full-time podcast boy, I had a hard hat with big ear clasp things that would go over your ear because of all the heavy machinery and stuff. You could use ear plugs, but it was just annoying to put them in and out. So I just had these big old clunky things that would flap down off of my hard hat and suction over my ear. Clearly, you need those to get around the sirens. Those were phenomenal at blocking different frequencies.
Yeah, I bet Hephaestus probably built a few of those helmets.
Ooh, and they probably looked much cooler than my hard hat with the big old plastic 3M clunky ear things.
It definitely had beautiful golden carvings on the side.
Yeah. Probably very, very cool. Okay, so talking about another person who is on an island and is scary. Yes. This is another character I've heard quite a bit about. It was one of those, oh yeah, I know you're a thing, but I know nothing about you. What's up with Circe?
I love Circe. Part of this is because I just read the book called Circe by Madelyn Miller, who wrote The Song of Achilles. I highly recommend it. I think that Miller did a really great job of taking these myths and sticking to them, the details, but twisting the perspective because it's all told from Circe's point of view. So Circe, in traditional myths, the way she's depicted is a witch who has been exiled to this island called Aiaia. She's the daughter of Helios, who is the titan of the sun, and a powerful river nymph. And Circe and all of her siblings, she has 2 brothers and a sister, they all have witch-like powers.
Okay. And if you heard my tummy grumble, it's because you said Aiaia, and I thought of paella. Ooh. And I'm now craving paella.
All right, we'll get some paella after this.
After the recording.
Yeah. So Circe was immortal, but she was said to have a mortal's voice. So her divine companions, they didn't like to be around her that much. And so she was kind of shunned, and then she was eventually exiled to this island. And her claim to fame, her main magical ability is that she's really good at transforming things. So in the Odyssey, for example, she turned a lot of men into pigs.
Right.
And in the book Circe by Madelyn Miller, she does a really good job of showing Circe's journey to get to that point. Like, why did she start turning men into pigs? But that's darker than Percy Jackson gets. Instead, she just turns Percy into a guinea pig, which I love.
Great joke. A really solid joke.
Also, it just makes a lot of sense. Circe is right. Pigs are a lot dirtier than guinea pigs and a lot harder to keep around.
Yeah.
So she's just doing smart business.
Real quick, with her voice, you said the mortal voice made people not want to be around her. Is that a thing? Just are mortal voices like nails on a chalkboard to immortal folks?
A lot of mortal everything is like nails on a chalkboard to divine figures. Our voices, the way we look, the way we smell, how we eat, just like everything about us is gross and temporary compared to gods. So she had a lot of these features that made humans feel more comfortable with her than they did around other godly characters. But the other gods did not want much to do with her.
Got it. Anyway, you were continuing on about Circe.
Right, yeah. She lived on this island. A lot of other godlike figures would send their disgraced daughters to her for short amounts of time to act as like handmaidens. And a lot of heroes visited her. A lot of heroes would stop by her island and either get turned into pigs or would use their cunning to avoid getting turned into pigs.
Okay, would they get lured to the island or were they intentionally seeking her out?
Some intentionally sought her out, but some were just like going around the sea full of monsters and would happen upon her island that looked nice. Like it had a beach without a lot of rocks. And so they could land and then they would explore the island, find her home and get invited in, eat a lot of her food, maybe threaten her a little, and then she would turn them into pigs.
Got it. Okay. So some more folks we meet along the Sea of Monsters are Scylla and Charybdis, which were terrifying.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about this scary dynamic duo?
I love Scylla and Charybdis as these two monsters that exist in the sea next to each other. There's this strait, this passage that you kind of have to go through if you want to get anywhere in the Sea of Monsters quickly, but it's really dangerous. So on one side is Charybdis, which is represented as this whirlpool, and on the other side is Scylla, who is this monster with 6 heads who eats a lot of people who pass by. Scylla actually was a beautiful nymph at one point who was chased by a lot of minor gods, and it was Circe who got jealous and turned her into this monster figure.
Okay.
Maybe she deserved it, maybe she didn't. So Scylla was once a nymph who was turned into this monster, and Charybdis was a very old, like very long ago offspring of Poseidon, again, and Gaia, the Earth goddess Titan.
Oh, yeah. I know Gaia from Captain Planet and the Planeteers.
I love learning where you heard all of your myth information from.
It's all media and not school.
I mean, that's how so many people learn most things,
right?
Actually. Poseidon and Gaia had Charybdis, and then I think her crime was that she just covered too much of the planet in water. She was helping Poseidon in his long feud against Zeus, and Zeus decided to punish her by turning her into a monster who has to suck up the water in the ocean. So she was doing that. Charybdis was this monster sucking up water in the ocean, and then Scylla saw that Charybdis was there and was like, oh, that looks like a nice place to settle, because when people are trying to avoid Charybdis, they'll have to come over to me. So then she settled there, and now she eats a lot of sailors.
Okay. And an interesting thing that I saw with these two characters in particular is that there doesn't seem to be one unified decision about what they look like. So at least when I was Google imaging Scylla, I think the most common version is kind of like a woman who, instead of being a centaur where the top half is woman, the bottom half is horse, her bottom half was these serpent-like heads. But then there's other depictions where it's more like a hydra, where Scylla is just the heads. Is there any sort of rhyme or reason as to when Scylla has a womanly form versus purely just water dragon snake-looking form?
No, I think that different writers wrote her differently, because really what was happening here was there was a whirlpool in this strait, and there was a very dangerous cliff edge on the other side. So it was a place where naturally a lot of deaths happened as people tried to go through this passage. And then they described it with these monsters. And so because they couldn't really see Scylla, there were a lot of different ways that people imagined her. I like the one where Circe, when she's cursing Scylla, gives her 6 leg type things that are dog bodies.
Whoa.
Yeah, I saw that description once and that stuck with me. But I tend to think of her as a Hydra type figure, where it's mostly just heads, and then whatever body is left, that's up in her cave and she never brings it out. She's just using her heads to eat people.
Just the heads picking off. Yeah, I feel like that makes more sense for how Scylla is described in the Sea of Monsters, because Percy always just says one of Scylla's heads. So I think that makes more sense. The other thing, when I looked up Charybdis, it was nightmare fuel because it kind of looks like the worm from Dune, but in the water. And I hate that.
I think that's accurate. That's what they would have said Charybdis looked like. Yeah, this big teeth collection.
Right. The most common illustrations I saw were either a big old worm type thing or just a whirlpool that, in addition to being scary water whirlpool, also had teeth in the water too. So just extra fun.
That all sounds terrifying.
Not great. Let's move on and take a break for the midroll, which I've decided I like to name the midrolls after the books, but I feel like the mythology episodes could have their own midroll name. So what we will be taking a break for here is the Mithril break.
Yes. A break of mythic proportions.
Hello and welcome to the Mithril break. Glad that this one has a name, and it's very fitting. You'll notice this is an iPhone recorded Mithril break. It's fitting for the Sea of Monsters Mithril break because I'm recording this one from the Jersey Shore. Not out on the shore, but in a house on the shore nearby. Anyway, let's talk about stuff. First, if you live in New Jersey, I'm doing a Potterless live show on July 16th in Asbury Park, New Jersey. You should come through. If you live in Florida, I'm going to be doing a Jacksonville Potterless live show on the 28th of July, and then I will be in Orlando for LeakyCon. If you want to get tickets to the Potterless live show events, you can go to potterlesspodcast.com, and if you want to get tickets to LeakyCon, you can go to leakycon.com, and if you use the promo code Potterless, you get 10% off tickets. And speaking of live shows, we've got the TNO live show on August 24th, the first ever TNO live show. It's going to be in New York City. It's going to be a blast, and it's looking more promising, like streaming the live show will be a possibility. It's not locked in just yet, so stay tuned for an update from me. But we're going to try to get that streamed. It should work out. Once it is 100% set, I will let you all know, and then we can get tickets up, and then everybody can see the show, not just people in the New York City area. So stay tuned for a future update there, but hopefully I'll have good news as early as next episode. Speaking of good news, I had a lot of good news this week in that we got a bunch of new patrons. A bunch of new folks joined over at thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. They're supporting the show. They're getting access to bonus content. They're getting access to all the old Potterless stuff too. And they're getting us closer to our goal of 1,000 patrons, which will unlock Stephen Parra and I doing a Hades live stream, and it's going to be a blast. But let's give a shout out to those new patrons. First, a shout out to Sandkopf, who upgraded to the Ultra God status. Shout out to our newest Super God tier patron, Carly Collette. Shout out to our newest God tier patrons, Window Wells and Musica, Sarah Neal, Riley Taylor, James Bass, Jessica Schwing, and Catherine Benoit. And shout out to our newest demigod tier patrons, Brooke Hobbs and Nick, aka Penny for Thought. Thank you all so much for your support. May Aphrodite bless you in that your hair always looks great once you're getting ready and you don't have to keep fixing it and adjusting it on your way out the door. Speaking of support, I want to thank Multitude for having us as a part of the collective. If you're all caught up on the newest Olympian, you're all caught up on other shows that I make, you're still looking for more podcasts, Multitude has a whole bunch of podcasts that you can listen to, and they're all made by lovely human beings. And one of those podcasts that's made by lovely humans that you might enjoy is called the Queer Movie Podcast, which is a queer movie watch party hosted by Rowan Ellis and Jazza John. You can join them as they research and rate their way through the queer film canon one genre at a time. From rom-coms to slashers, contemporary art house cinema to black and white classics, QMP is a celebration of all things gay on the silver screen. New episodes drop every other Thursday, and you can search for Queer Movie Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And before we wrap up here, you're going to hear words from a few sponsors who make it feasible for me to be a full-time podcaster. Some of these ads will be read by me, others of them won't. The ones that are not read by me are inserted locally. So if you live in New Jersey on the Jersey Shore, don't be surprised if you hear an ad for a gym or a laundromat or a tanning salon. And once those ads are complete, we'll get back to this episode of The Newest Olympian.
And we're back, and there are more myths to discuss. Let's get to the big picture, the kind of overarching story that shaped the Sea of Monsters, the Odyssey. How similar is the Odyssey to the journey in the Sea of Monsters? I know we don't get, is it Penelope who delays all of the suitors and stuff while Odysseus is gone?
Yeah.
Which is my favorite, and I hope that finds its way into Percy Jackson. I guess it kind of did with Grover a little bit, but how similar, how different do we stray from the Odyssey in the Sea of Monsters?
That's a great connection. The Grover being the parallel to Penelope, fighting off suitors of Polyphemus. Love that. Yeah.
Thank you. I came up with that on the spot at a Potterless live show recently. Someone asked a question. They said, what Greek myth have you read that you actually know about that hasn't found its way into the series yet? And I started to say the Penelope thing. And after I said it, I realized, wait, Grover's kind of doing this to Polyphemus.
Yes.
Not forcing him to shoot an arrow through a bunch of handle holes or whatever, but still.
But like fighting him off. Yeah, fighting off suitors is the classic Greek myth trope.
Yeah, lying to gross men. We love it.
We love it. Yeah, so I'd say that the Sea of Monsters is like the Odyssey light.
Okay.
A lot of the things that Percy does, Odysseus also does, but Odysseus does a lot more. For one, the Odyssey is 10 years long.
10 years, 10 days?
10 years. Yeah. Odysseus was fighting in the Trojan War for 10 years, and then it took him 10 years to get back to Ithaca.
Damn.
Yeah, but I looked up the list of stops, so I have like a beat-by-beat comparison.
Great.
So it's a lot shorter in the Sea of Monsters. Percy doesn't start at Troy, which is where Odysseus starts, and then he doesn't go to the land of the Ciconians, which is Odysseus's first stop, where he makes his really bad error that basically like ruins the rest of his trip by not honoring the gods and by doing a lot of very brutal things on the island of the Ciconians.
Okay.
Percy doesn't do that. He doesn't go to the island of the Lotus Eaters, but that's because they were used in the first book at that Las Vegas casino.
Mm-hmm.
Then Odysseus goes to the Cyclops Island with Polyphemus, but in the Sea of Monsters, that's the destination, not just one of the stops along the way.
Mm-hmm. A quick question about Polyphemus. Someone in the Olympic court said something about Polyphemus's brothers. He has brothers?
Yeah, of course he has brothers. He's a Cyclops, the son of Poseidon. And in some stories, he has 2 other brothers. And in other stories, he's one of 7. But that's part of why Odysseus has to be so clever in saying that his name is Nobody or No One. Because when they're all running away and Polyphemus is screaming, "Nobody shot me in the eye," he's screaming to someone. So they had to be clever because there were other Cyclops around who could come to Polyphemus's aid.
Okay, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Percy does get turned into a guinea pig by Circe, but he does not sleep with her like Odysseus does.
Odysseus.
Yeah. Odysseus.
Wait, did Odysseus sleep with her pre or post being turned into a pig?
Odysseus wasn't turned into a pig. Just his shipmates were. But he stayed with Circe for a year. They ended up becoming lovers. And then later on, after Odysseus leaves, Circe has his baby. The baby goes off to find Odysseus. I'm just giving you all of Circe's story.
Love it. Please.
The baby, Telegonus, goes off to find Odysseus, but ends up basically being responsible for Odysseus's death. So then Telegonus has to come back to Aiaia, to Circe's island, with Penelope, who was Odysseus's wife, and their son, Telemachus. So they come back to Circe's island. Circe falls in love with Telemachus, and then they get married. So she had a baby with Odysseus and then fell in love with Odysseus's other son from his first marriage.
That's messy.
There's so much drama in Greek myths, and I'm here for it.
Greek myth family trees are wild because you can have all of the different lines, and then sometimes your brother is a sheep.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so that's all that information about Circe. Percy does not have to go to the island of Aeolia. Odysseus did that to get a bag of wind from the god of wind so that he could travel through the sea quicker. That doesn't ended up working.
He didn't get a big jar of mayonnaise.
No, not a big jar of mayonnaise. But Percy didn't have to go to this island because Hermes just gave him the thermos full of wind.
And I'm now realizing that the thermos full of wind, I thought it was going to have a more dramatic usage.
Yeah.
But I guess Percy was falling, and then it got used to rocket him so that he didn't just hit the ground. But yeah, I remember one of my failed predictions, because I got to hold myself accountable for the things I get wrong. It can't just be all victory laps with me predicting Thalia, which I will take another one right here. Ooh, tiny lap around the microphone.
Nice.
But I did think that the thermos was going to be a bigger play than it was. I thought that was going to be used in a big final fight type situation.
Yeah, it could have been. It wasn't. It was a little disappointing. Odysseus used it. He had this bag of winds that he was going to use to make it all the way back to Ithaca. So he was guarding this bag, and their ship was going very fast, but then he fell asleep, and Odysseus's shipmates took the bag away, and they ended up totally derailing their journey. So like so many times, Odysseus almost makes it home and then doesn't because of things that his shipmates do.
He's got to get a better crew.
He really does. They're messing up.
I think this is all just a moral. You need a good support system around you. And you can't have a crew that's turning into pigs and stealing your bag of wind. Come on.
Yes. Odysseus had a hard time, and Percy just did not have to go through all of that mess. Percy didn't stop at the island of the Laistrygonians because they encountered them earlier in the book.
Right.
Yes. We can talk about them now, or we can talk about them later.
Let's talk about them now, because one of my questions was, quote, what the heck are the Laistrygonian giants?
Very important question. So they are another species descended from Poseidon. The original giant, Laistrygonian, was the offspring of Poseidon and Gaia, and then these giants are all descended from Laistrygonian. They are mostly known for their appearance in the Odyssey. They ate many of Odysseus's men. So Odysseus and his men, they land on this island. A lot of them get eaten by these giant cannibals. And
Good riddance, because they're worthless anyway.
Yeah, the crew kind of suck. And then when they leave, at this point, Odysseus still has most of his ships. I think he left Troy with 12 ships. When they leave the island of the Laistrygonians, the giants throw down a bunch of giant boulders from high cliffs onto their ships, and 11 of them end up being destroyed.
Wow. And the boulders found their way into the Sea of Monsters. That was Polyphemus's weapon of choice.
Yeah. Even in the myths, Polyphemus also uses boulders. But yeah, lots of boulders.
Right. And that would make sense of why the dodgeball game was dodgeball and not some other sport. Yeah.
Oh, I love these connections. Yeah, so Percy faced the Laistrygonians in a different way. He didn't have to go to the underworld this time. In the Odyssey, Odysseus goes to the underworld to learn something that one of the gods decides he needs to know.
This dude's had a trip.
Yes.
I think it's bad sometimes when my flight gets rerouted. This dude had to go to the underworld. What if Delta Airlines was like, actually, your flight has been rerouted into hell?
Oh my God.
Which I guess would just be, I don't know, Dulles International Airport.
Yeah. I just pictured being in airports for 10 years straight, just routed to city. Awful.
Oh, yeah, that would be one of those Sisyphus type things, your personal hell. Constantly getting rerouted, or your plane constantly delayed or changing gates or whatever. It'd be pretty rough.
Now I really need someone to write a modern day Odyssey that's just someone getting trapped in different airports for a long time.
It'd be really good. I'd read it.
So no visit to the underworld. Yes, Percy and Annabeth passed the Sirens. They passed Scylla and Charybdis, but they did not lose anyone, unlike Odysseus, who lost at least 6 men to Scylla. They did not go to the island of Helios. They didn't meet Calypso, and they didn't do that last stop with the Phaeacians. And then they made it back home.
All right. I guess they did lose some people to Scylla and Charybdis, but it was just dead Confederates, so no loss.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Already dead, already bad guys, no loss.
I wonder if Scylla still snacks on them. Does it still count for her if they're already dead, if they're just bones?
Yeah, maybe she has a new collection of toothpicks that she can utilize them for future snacking purposes. So,
but if she's just necks, she doesn't have any hands.
One mouth holds them so the other mouth can pick it out. I do like the idea of her snatching a bunch of the Confederates and just every time being like, oh, another skeleton? Come on! What's a big snakehead creature got to do around here to get some meat?
Poor Scylla. She's just hungry.
She just wants a snack.
I get it.
Look, I love a snack. I get it. Sometimes I get really grumpy if I haven't had a snack. Now, here on The Noose Olympian, we are an incredibly pro pigeon podcast. And early in this book, there was a group of birds that were originally introduced as demon pigeons. And I feel like that besmirches the good name of pigeons. We later learned they are the Stymphalian birds. So my question to you is, what are the origins and what is going on with the Stymphalian birds?
The Stymphalian birds are the 6th of Hercules' 12 labors.
Right.
He has to defeat them. There's not much else about them in mythology that I could find. They are flesh-eating birds with metallic beaks and wings. According to some sources, they were created by Ares. According to other sources, they were sometimes the pets of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. So lots of war, lots of hunting wrapped up in the aura of the Stymphalian birds. They were chased by wolves to the region in like Greece and Italy of Arcadia, and then they were defeated by Hercules, who scared them away from their trees by rattling a rattle, by making a loud noise, and then he shot them with bows and arrows.
Amazing. Yeah, okay. That feels pretty true to form in terms of what we learn in the books.
Yeah.
Still terrifying.
Still terrifying, but they make a nice cameo. I appreciate that Uncle Rick does this a lot, where he doesn't use characters from mythology in exactly the same way they were used in mythology, but he still makes sure they're present in the story, which is nice because in this world, they would be present. They would be like watching these chariot races or doing just some like foreboding, ominous, evil things as Stymphalian birds. They don't have to just be fighting Hercules.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the chariot races, are there any big Greek mythological stories behind them? I know a little bit about chariot races just from when I took Latin in high school, more of how they would have races at the Circus Maximus and stuff. But chariot racing does become a big deal in this book. Are there any big Greek myths where, I don't know, someone has to win a chariot race from a big figure we would know?
I know that chariot races were big in like the Iliad, in like the Trojan War, when they have done chariot races to see who the best warriors were. But nothing comes to mind of stories where like a hero has to beat someone in a chariot race. I think we talked last time about how chariots are special to Athena and Poseidon because Athena invented the chariot and Poseidon invented the horses. So that's a good opportunity for teamwork there, but nothing else that I know of.
And that's very cool how it does end up that Percy and Annabeth finally, by the end of the book, get to ride on a chariot together, kind of bringing down their parents' original teamwork makes the dream work situation, which is very fun. Speaking of things that we mentioned last time that I did forget because I am a human being and not a computer, is that you mentioned in the last mythology episode that Kronos is the father of Chiron, and I forgot, which was good because then when the reveal happened, I totally forgot. I think what I do is that I compartmentalize, especially when talking to you about these, is I feel like I file things away in terms of, well, we have Chiron, the character in Percy Jackson, and then we have Chiron, the mythological being that is all these different potential stories and stuff. So I didn't hold on to that when I was thinking more in depth about Chiron, the character. But now that this reveal is out there, how did Kronos have Chiron? Like, who's Chiron's mom? Do we know? I know this was not one of the things we prepped, so this is just springing on the moment, but I don't know if there's further things to discuss with that very fun family reveal that we get towards the end of the Sea of Monsters.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I do know that Chiron is supposed to be different from the other centaurs in that he's more quote unquote civilized. He's smarter. He's less violent. I don't know if that means that Kronos had Chiron with like a centaur woman, for example. I don't know who Chiron's mom is.
Are there centaur women? That was a question Kelly and I had when we meet all the party ponies in this book. I don't think they ever explicitly say one way or the other, but are there lady centaurs?
There must be lady centaurs.
Okay.
Nothing in my brain is telling me that there aren't lady centaurs, so I'm gonna go on record and say that there are. Because, like, why wouldn't there be? I don't see any reason that a centaur has to be the male offspring of a horse and a human-like figure. I think that most centaurs would be the offspring of other centaurs, so there must be female centaurs.
Yeah. According to a quick Google, there are lady centaurs, and they are called either the Centaurides or the Centauruses.
Ooh.
First encountered in Greek mythology as members of the tribe of the Centauroi, the Centaurides are only occasionally mentioned in written sources, but appear frequently in Greek art and Roman mosaics. So the answer is yes. Hooray!
Hooray! I want to ride a lady centaur.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
I much prefer riding mares to riding dude horses.
I guess you have more experience with this coming from the woods. I've ridden a horse exactly one time, and I think I'm going to stop after one because Kelly and I rode horses on our honeymoon because that was the thing that you could do on the beach, which sounded very cool.
Yeah.
Until we were riding on our horses and we learned the hard way that our two horses did not like each other.
Oh, no.
And that was not ideal because I think my horse kept sniffing or biting the butt of Kelly's horse.
But in a mean way?
Yeah, I don't know. And then Kelly's horse would try to like kick my horse. So I was trying to steer my horse away from Kelly's horse. You're riding like on the beach by the water. I was like, I don't want to fall over into the water. This is a bad situation. So I was trying to steer my horse away. But then the people doing the horse tour wanted the newlyweds to have a photo together. And we were trying to explain to them, no, our horses do not like each other. It was a very stressful time. I do not think I'll ever get on a horse again.
Oh, no. Yeah, that was a bad introduction to horse riding. And the people who set that up should have known that those horses didn't get along.
I don't know, maybe this was their first fight. Who's to say? But all I know is that it was not fun and it was very stressful. And it just wasn't worth it. For me, it's like one of those best case, worst case scenario things. And it's like, best case scenario, I ride a horse. Okay, I could also walk down the beach and I would have just as much fun.
Yeah, riding a horse on the beach is not the best place to ride a horse. I think that you'd have more fun like in a field or the woods or something.
Maybe I will explore other horse situations. Maybe I'll know there's a better horse. On a ranch, maybe. But as far as beach horse riding, not going to do it.
Fair. I rode a camel recently.
Ooh, right.
And that was awesome.
Okay. And camels are ones that are cool to ride. It's not like elephants where you're not actually supposed to ride them.
Right, yeah. People have been riding camels for a long time. Good. But the most surprising thing was that it's so tall.
Yeah.
So like the camels have these toothpick legs. I have no idea how they hold themselves up. And then the saddle that you sit on is on top of the hump.
Okay.
So the camel itself is already tall. And then by the time you sit on top of the saddle, my head was at like 9 feet. I was so high up.
My gosh, your head could dunk a basketball.
It could. It's the only time in my life I will ever be taller than Shaq.
So the final mythological character figure that came up that I wanted to know more about was someone that I think was mentioned in literally just one sentence as a passing thing. Ganymede or Ganymede? Yeah. Okay,
Ganymede.
Who is that? What's up with them?
Ganymede was a beautiful human Trojan prince. And like so many beautiful humans, an Olympian god took an interest in Ganymede. In this particular case, that Olympian god was Zeus, who fell so in lust with Ganymede that he had to steal him away to be his cupbearer. So whenever Zeus is thirsty up on Olympus, it's Ganymede's job to bring him a full cup. And it's also suspected that they became lovers.
So this is the Greek equivalent of hiring the pool boy.
Yes, absolutely. And in astronomy, all of the moons of Jupiter are named after characters from mythology who were involved with Zeus or Jupiter. So Ganymede is one of the moons of Jupiter because of this little tryst that they have.
Okay. That's very fun. I'm glad they did that. Look at the planet naming people go. That's very fun.
Oh, yeah. All of the planets and their moons have fun naming conventions in our solar system.
Does our moon have a cool name? Why is it just the moon? It feels like a very American decision to be like, we are Earth. This is the moon.
It is up to the International Astronomical Union, which is heavily dominated by Americans. I will say that. But it's also because it's the only one.
Got it.
I think in more official documents, its name is like Luna.
Oh, okay. That's more fun. Get a little Latin in the mix.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. Are there any other things besides the questions that I had? Any other things we didn't touch on? Any other myths that you wanted to bring up or discuss before we move on into book 3? The Titan's Curse?
Oh, book 3 is a good one. I think we touched on all of it. Medea, I think, doesn't get the attention she deserves as the granddaughter of Helios, as a witch in her own right. She is the reason that Jason was able to take the fleece. She is the reason that Jason's mission was successful. And then she was mistreated by Jason and his people later on.
No.
So I want to put a shout out to Medea out into the universe.
Yeah, and then she becomes the namesake of the Tyler Perry movies. Just not going well for her.
No, it's really not. And I don't know why Tyler Perry did that. Like, I would love to know if he was trying to reference this Medea, but I don't see many parallels.
No, I don't know much about Tyler Perry. I wouldn't guess that he would be a big Greek mythology guy.
You never know. Some people have like the wildest, most unexpected interests.
I'll have to see. If I ever find myself with Tyler Perry, I
Okay.
will ask him,
Thank you.
was Medea named after the Greek figure? Were you trying to throw some more notoriety towards her?
Tyler Perry has actually just been on a career-long mission to get everyone to see how awesome Medea from Greek mythology is.
And he failed so spectacularly. I can't fully say. I've never seen a Tyler Perry movie.
It's worth it.
Are they? I mean,
No, it's good in the way that Sharknado is good, where it's so bad
Gotcha.
it rounds back into being good again.
okay, yeah.
Not all of them, because there are so many now, but there are a few good ones that I think you should know just to be a member of culture.
Okay, yeah. I think the closest I've been is that I drove past the Tyler Perry Studios, which are called the Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta, Georgia. Come on, couldn't even come up with some fun name? Just
No.
Tyler Perry Studios?
Mhm.
Very boring, very boring. Well, what was not boring was this episode.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Moiya, for coming on and lending more Greek mythological expertise. This is nice. Obviously, you will be back when we learn whatever the heck is going on in the Titan's Curse. I do not know anything about that book at all. I have no idea what's to come, but based on the ending of The Sea of Monsters, I guess we're going to learn about Thalia. I don't know if she is a character that also existed in Greek mythology or if she's named after someone or anything. I'm going in completely blank there. So that could be a fun future discussion. But until you are back on the pod, if people want to find you doing stuff, where can they find you? Where can they hear you and read you and see you? You're doing so many things. Please shout out all of the things.
All of the things. Okay, let me try to remember the order. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at GoAstroMo. You can find my podcast Exolore, so that's where you can hear me. Wherever you get your podcasts, it's EXOLORE, and you can find it online at ExolorePod.
There's a recent episode with a guy named Mike Schubert, who was a great guest. He was really good.
Yeah, I was just going to shout out that episode. I did a tournament-style bracket of all of the worlds that I've built on Exolore, and Mike was the judge to help me find the definitively decided Mike Schubert's best Exolore world.
Right. And I got to say, the one that we ended up picking, I feel very good about. And then I immediately listened to that episode of Exolore, and I felt very sound in my decision. It was fantastic.
Awesome. Yes. So that's Exolore. You can see me on YouTube. I host a show about mythology for PBS called Fate and Fabled. So you can find that on the YouTubes. And if you would like to read words that I have written, I have a book coming out on August 16th called The Milky Way, an autobiography of our galaxy. It's all about the evolution of the Milky Way galaxy and our understanding of it, but told from the Milky Way's point of view. So it's a character giving us its own autobiography.
I love it so much. I need to pre-order it. And this is a good question for me and then for anyone listening. Is there a preferred place to pre-order, preferably one that does not give Jeff Bezos any money?
I'm partial to Bookshop. I love them.
Yes.
It's a great way to support your local independent bookstores, but I get the same amount of like royalty money from anything. So wherever you want to buy it is good.
Okay. Then what I will do in the notes description section of this podcast, I will put the link to the Bookshop pre-order. So if anyone wants to do that, you can click that. And then you're supporting Dr. Moiya, you're supporting local bookshops, and you're not giving any money to Jeff Bezos,
Hell
which
yeah.
is always the correct thing to do.
Yes.
Oh, man. Well, Dr. Moiya, thank you again so much for joining. This has been a blast. I'm very excited to learn more things next time you come around. But until then, and until I figure out what the heck is going on in the Titan's Curse, who's the Titan? What curse is it? I'm guessing Kronos. Just a thought, but we will see. But until then, I'll pursue you later. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Newest Olympian. This podcast is created, hosted, and produced by me, Mike Schubert. I also run the social media and the website. Our editor is Sherry Guo. The music is by Bettina Campamanes and Brandon Grugel, and the art is by Jessica E. Boyd. If you love the show, you cannot get enough of the show, you need some more, you can go to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon, and you can get access to more bonus episodes, monthly live streams, the Discord, so much fun stuff, all at thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. And speaking of the Patreon, I want to give a shout out to our producer level patrons: Lotta Bartova, Kelsey Gillespie, The Damn Steam Nuggets, Emma Cooey, Vicky Garcia, Ellie Housekovchova, Veronica Bartova, Haley Hastings, Robin Garcia, Frida Vikstrom, Megan Moon, Tough Bayfong, Moo Productions, Don't Call Me Nymphadora, Olivia Y, Craig McRoberts, Taylor Payne, Giselle Salvador, Minka Dreesen, Can't-I Seaweed Brain, Matt Barger, Peter Johnson the Twin, Sabrina Balsiger, Boney Pony, Getting Stoned with Smelly Gabe, Heather McMillan, Casey Canales, Polly Burridge, Nikki Harris, Tatiana Schmidt, Sandra Rose, Bridget Lowry, Josh Sayer, Percy Blue, Josh Wilkie, Abby Ryan, Shannon Yvonne Aguilar, Wise Girl, Alpacas Are Hope, Milo TZ, Roxas 1912, Rafaela, Ashton Gabrielson, Cara Marin, Colby, Marco Redhouse, Falcon, Joey James, Christopher William Boucher, Justin Lux, Caden Max, Sam Ruby, Carly Allen, Riley Kiedis, Mary Kelly, Audra McKenzie, Mrs. O'Leary, Marina Foose, Aaron Wood, Tyler Hendricks, Molly Snyder, Rodith Kalna, and Milo Kim. Now, if you want to support the show, but in a non-monetary way, first you could follow us on social media. We're at Newest Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We also have a subreddit, reddit.com/r/TheNewestOlympian. And then you could talk about us on social media. That really helps. Word of mouth is really huge. Or you could leave a rating and review on whatever podcast app you're using. So Apple Podcasts or Spotify let you rate. If you want to rate us, leave a nice review. That's really nice. But honestly, the biggest thing, word of mouth. If you think of someone that would love the show, reach out to them directly and say, hey, there's this podcast, there's this guy, he's reading the Percy Jackson books for the very first time. I think you're going to like it. Here's a link to it. That is huge. All of these things help, and I'm appreciative to all of you who have done it or who will do it in the future.
But I'm just so thankful that you listened to this episode, and I hope you tune into our next episode, where we will be kicking off the third book in the series, The Titan's Curse, with returning fan favorite guest Stephen Parra. We'll be discussing the first chapter and half of chapter 2. But until then, I'll see you later. Hey everyone, how's it going? It's me, ASMR Mike. So for this ASMR Mike segment, I will be playing the sounds of the Jersey Shore, which is where I'm currently at on vacation with my parents. I hope you enjoy.